Now we're going to be discussing social realism, a huge departure from our last movement, surrealism. So, as I always tell you, we see these ups and downs, right, with art movements. We see a movement that has certain values, and typically the next movement goes completely against those values, rejects them utterly. And social realism is really the opposite of surrealism. It is a movement that is embedded in the Great Depression and takes the events of the Great Depression as its subject matter. If you don't know much about the Great Depression, it is based on the stock market crash, right, of October 1929. And from then on into the 1930s, you have this staggering depression in the American economy. And so something like Dada or surrealism, which could be viewed as flippant, vanity art, things that are about things outside of the reality of people's lives, that kind of art probably seemed very out of place or ridiculous or even insulting as people turned into the Great Depression and started to think about the real things that were affecting them, the real things that were happening around them. So this movement to me really thinks about what people are suffering, what people are experiencing, and tries to have art that's about exposing that and showing that to people. Because of that, it's a very realistic, movement. It's very much based in photojournalism quite a bit, which you can see here with the artist Dorothea Lange, and the next artist I'm going to show you, Margaret Burke-White. So, as I mentioned, women artists are getting more traction, but it's still a little harder for them sometimes to be taken seriously. Women actually, during the social realist period, start to turn towards what we call photojournalism. They start to think about photography as an entry right into the arts world. And it was really a smart move for them to make because photography, as I'd mentioned, wasn't taken very seriously by many. Still today in art history is sometimes not taken very seriously by people, which I find still shocking. As a medium, it's sometimes still sort of poo-pooed as not fine art, which is ridiculous. But women, they kind of looked at this as like, well, I can get my foot in the door here. I could be making art in a way that's more, acceptable perhaps. And they were doing it on the ground, right? They were working for magazines like Time and Life, and sort of getting in there and using their art in a purposeful way, in a way that was about showing society what was happening around them. So it was a great thing to turn to, photojournalism. Dorothea Lange, she worked for many of these magazines, and this is a piece from her famous Migrant series, right, that she did about migrant workers. Now, in the Depression, many people had to turn to government assistance, and there were many different groups set up to help out with assisting the population, getting them income, getting them jobs. And one of them was the WPA, or the Works Projects Administration. You can go to pretty much any town in America and see something related to the WPA or funded by the WPA. And they were very instrumental in funding the arts as well. So artists had something to turn to. They'd fund artists to go to post offices and paint murals, or again, do photojournalistic projects like this. So she was actually funded through the FSA, or the Farm Security Administration, to complete this project. And her goal was to travel around and look at families that had been displaced during the Depression, who had lost their homes, who had lost their savings, who had lost everything, and the links they were being pushed to. And, it's supposed to be a way of seeing the reality of this, the truth of this. And so this is a family that she was following around, as a young mother with her children, and this sort of weariness of the experience of being a migrant farmer. Um, when you work in photojournalism, it's about having your subjects trust you and open up to you. Notice the children seem still sort of afraid, but the mother seems perhaps that Lang has been around her enough that she's showing you the reality. And this is really the core of American social realism, which is, what is the truth? What is the reality? What is happening? Let me show that to you. And this mother was only like 26 or 28 years old, something in there, where she looks much older from this experience. So Lang was trying to capture this. Another famous photojournalist is Margaret Burke-White, whose works now sell for a very high price at auction. Who's thought to be one of the first really high-ranking women photojournalists out there. And this is a piece she did after the Louisville flood, and I'm always struck just by the contrast of it. She's saying to you there's an America and there's an America. And you can do with that what you like. Where you have the ad, which is touting, like, the upper middle class trappings of the American way, and then the bread line down below. There's obviously a stark black white divide, so you can get into the racial consequences of this image. As well. So again, she's kind of Margaret Berkowitz kind of saying, like, look at what is happening. Like, we're told we can be prosperous, but is that what we really get? What is happening to real people? Is that in alignment with what media tells us or advertising tells us?